What is going on, everyone? Welcome to the Brant Partial Show. So let's get into it. Let's talk. We'll do some NFL draft talk. Let's start with the quarterbacks, and I wanted to talk about Shedeur Sanders. So Shedeur Sanders, the son of Deion Sanders, played at Jackson State the last couple seasons. Shedeur Sanders does have a skill set that I does think translates well to the NFL. How good is he going to be next year at Colorado will be critical in seeing how he projects to the NFL. I think he's already shown a good skill set overall. I think there's a lot of things to like. I think his release is fairly quick. Excuse me. I think it's fluid. Or I think it's actually not super quick. Excuse me. I think it's fairly fluid, but it's not. It's almost like he's kind of like. It's like he fakes for a second and then throws it. But it is like a fairly quick over the top throw. Sanders, he's a playmaker. This is a guy that can scramble. He can run. You see a lot of kind of flashes of his dad, just the athleticism when he really takes off and goes. But can make guys miss the open field. I think he goes through reads fairly quick. I think he sets up his feet pretty quick. I think he navigates the pocket fairly well. So, yeah, Shedeur Sanders, this guy who, telling year this year at Colorado, how he does, I think will be really telling of if he moves up or not in the consensus ranking, because he's a guy that's ranked, he's a little bit lower in the consensus ranking, rightfully so, because this is a guy that just needs to prove that he can continue and play at a high level at a Power 5 school. So, yeah, Shedeur Sanders, it's going to be a telling year for him. We'll see how he performs at Colorado. Colorado, a chance to be a good team this year, or a chance to be a very improved team. And if Shedeur Sanders plays a critical role in that, and you see a lot of playmaking ability, not just scrambling, but you see him improve as a passer, can kind of quicken up that release a little bit. I think that'll be big for Shedeur Sanders. So Caleb Williams, a consensus number one guy, and Caleb Williams, when you watch him, he's fun to watch, and Caleb Williams just does a terrific job of moving around in the pocket, throwing. He can throw from different arm angles. I love how quickly he's ready to make a decision. He makes snap, quick decisions off of play action. I think that is really what I like about Caleb Williams. So Williams, the Heisman winner last year, he's got good size. Can throw accurately downfield, can really push the ball on like intermediate throws. So yeah, Caleb Williams, with all the skills and what he's accomplished thus far, it's safe for me to say that I would have him as the number one quarterback. And I think that it's kind of like Bijan Robinson last year. I think you're not going to find, someone's going to have to be very brave to not have him as the number one quarterback. And if someone doesn't, they are really going to have some explaining to do. I know a lot can change. I know Quinn Ewers is really rising up the consensus board. Quinn Ewers, during the season last year, I had Quinn Ewers. I thought Quinn Ewers would probably be the second overall quarterback, and now he's up to the third consensus. Michael Penix is kind of slipping for whatever reason, but yeah, Caleb Williams, to me, if someone challenges that view of him not the number one quarterback, then yeah, you're gonna have to do some explaining. You're gonna have to do the guy that you're vouching for number one. You're really gonna have to make a strong case for that guy, and really, you're gonna have to there must be, for that to happen. Like, say you're gonna promote Drake May number one, you're really gonna have to. A few skill sets of Drake May, you're really going to have to sell that to people of why they're better than Caleb Williams. So, yeah, Caleb Williams, it seems like a lock for the number one pick, and him and Arizona Cardinals seems to be associated with each other now. It seems like every time people talk about NFL draft early picks, you think Cardinals, Caleb Williams. It's kind of like last year. You think you associated with Bryce Young, Houston Texans, or when the Carolina Panthers traded up for number one, you thought Carolina Panthers, Bryce Young. So, yeah, Caleb Williams going to be really heavily talked about. And like I was thinking, if a team wants to move up and trade for that number one pick because they want Caleb Williams bad, they were going to have to give up some serious draft capital to do so. So that will be fascinating to watch. Say the Cardinals do end up with the top overall pick. I guess what could happen is Houston is really bad. Like, Houston is the worst record, and the Cardinals, maybe they play okay with Kyler Murray, and they choose to keep Kyler Murray. It'd be interesting to see what type of haul a team would give up for Caleb Williams. So, yeah, that'll be fascinating. But, yeah, the quarterback, Riley Leonard's another guy from Duke. I was watching Leonard. He's an athletic guy, does a really good job of making plays off of read action, and a guy that's got some pretty good long speed and some bursts. So, yeah, Riley Leonard, a guy who is kind of quietly shooting up the consensus rank, talented quarterback out of Duke. So, yeah, it'll be fun to see how he does this year. A guy who mid-range accuracy is good. He can throw the ball downfield. He's got good size, physical stature, pretty well built, muscularized, and just pretty good thickness overall in the lower and upper body. So, yeah, Riley Leonard, number 13 quarterback from Duke, definitely got to keep an eye on. So we'll kind of shift gears here. I want to talk some of the safeties. So Rod Moore from Michigan. Rod Moore was a guy that really burst onto the scene for Michigan this year. A guy that really had a nice season. Physical, hard-hitting, fearless safety. A little bit undersized, but he will come downhill and hit someone. Can make plays on the ball. Did give up some catches, but a lot of that was due to him just being a little bit shorter. Some of the bigger receivers, I think bigger receivers, bigger tight ends will be a problem. But as far as just a tenacious, get after it, tone-setting safety, that's what Rod Moore will bring to the table. So another guy, James Williams from Miami, Florida. So James Williams is kind of like a linebacker safety hybrid. He's very interesting, a former 5-star guy. He's 6'5", 215 pounds, and Williams will bring it. He will hit people. This guy who can force fumbles, guy that just tends to be around the ball and make plays on the ball. Give you a little bit of Tyrann Mathieu vibes, just a guy that's got a knack for forcing fumbles, recovering fumbles, jumping routes, coming down with interceptions, just a playmaker and a guy that's going to be a nice piece to the Miami defense this year. Yeah, so James Williams, I think a lot of people will be kind of infatuated with his size in the burst and overall speed and athleticism this guy has for a guy this big. So where he projects at the next level, it's kind of like the Isaiah Simmons thing. Is Williams is he a linebacker or safety? And if we put him at one of those positions, can he play at a high level at whatever position we choose to in the NFL? It's kind of the problem with Isaiah Simmons. It's the do-it-all guys are great, but in the end, in the NFL, can we find just one position where this guy can play at a high level for us? So yeah, we'll talk some corners too, staying with the DBs. Josh Newton from TCU. So I didn't really know a lot about Josh Newton. Obviously, I watched TCU last year, but Josh Newton, he never really caught my eye when I was watching TCU. But this is a guy that's is a fluid mover. He's got good agility, can open his hips well. He's good in man coverage. Guy that can come up and make tackles. He had 12 pass breakups last season, so does a really good job of reading quarterback, making plays on the ball, can really jump in breaking routes. A guy that's not afraid to get physical. Was one of the bright spots, I guess if there were any bright spots to TCU going against Georgia in the national title game, I thought he did a really nice job in coverage. Certainly did not play a role in Georgia rolling TCU. So, yeah, Josh Newton, I think this is a guy who people are going to start paying more and more attention to as next season goes on. Obviously, he needs to stay healthy, but yeah, Newton, he's got a skill set as far as he checks all the boxes as far as physical corner who can play man coverage, could play zone coverage. I think he's a guy that really is going to thrive in man coverage, and he's an easy mover. Change of directions, easy, in and out of breaks. It's all there for Josh Newton. We'll just see how he does this season, and if he can follow up a season like last year. This season, I think he's going to have a chance to be one of the top corners, and I think he'll get more and more talk as we go along in the 2023 season. So Kalen King from Penn State. Kalen King has been one of my favorite corners to watch. This is a guy that's a really good athlete, can jump, go up and get interceptions. Played really well for Penn State this year. Joey Porter kind of got a lot of the accolades and got a lot of the talk last year for Penn State, but Kalen King was no slouch at all at corner, and he's going to be one of their main guys in the secondary. He's going to get a lot more attention and probably will get thrown at a little and challenged even more often, but I think he'll be ready for it. It's a guy that's good in man coverage. You see he can really turn it open and run downfield with wide receivers. Hands are really good, can come down with interceptions with no problem. So, yeah, Kalen King is actually moved in the consensus number 2 corner ahead of Denzel Burke. So, yeah, Kalen King, really, really good player for the Penn State Nittany Lions and will certainly be a key piece to their defensive secondary in 2023. But yeah, Kool-Aid McKinstry, still my top corner. Kool-Aid he's such a good player. And former 5-star recruit, you can tell he's been coached up. You can tell he's really taken Nick Saban's coaching to heart. It's a guy who there's no wasted movements to his game. He's so fundamentally sound, mirrors receivers well, does a good job he understands leverage, where the sideline is, where his help is in zone coverage. So all the traits are evident with Kool-Aid McKinstry, and he's a guy who, we talk about Caleb Williams, the number 1 quarterback, Brock Bowers, the number 1 tight end. I think I've touched on this before. Kool-Aid McKinstry, it's going to be hard for him to move out of the top corner spot, because I think with him, you could argue that maybe Kalen King, maybe Denzel Burke has some traits that maybe are better athletically. But it's kind of Kool-Aid McKinstry kind of reminds me of Patrick Surtain. Like, he's so he's maybe not an elite. He doesn't have maybe like an all-around elite skill set, or he doesn't have like multiple traits that are elite, but everything's very good. And you combine that with the being fundamentally sound and well coached by Nick Saban, and you have a really, really good corner who has at least a high floor in the NFL. I think Kool-Aid McKinstry, even if he doesn't develop into Ahmad Gardner, Patrick Surtain, if he doesn't develop into elite corner, he's going to be a really good corner in the NFL for a long time. And yeah, this year just enters his true junior year in 2023. He already has quite a bit of experience playing too. Played a lot in 2021 and then was a full-time starter this year in 2022. So already has a lot of experience, and you combine that with coaching by Nick Saban, who works with the defensive back. So yeah, Kool-Aid McKinstry has a chance to be a really good corner at the next level and sits at the top of the consensus corner rankings. Yeah, some other guys we talked about, Kamari Lassitier. So I don't think Lassitier's movement skills really jump off the tape, but Lassitier, another guy, kind of like Kool-Aid McKinstry, has been coached up really well by Kirby Smart in the Georgia coaching staff. So yeah, Lassitier, I think he, to me, is a guy who I think will have a high floor in the NFL. I think has a chance to be a starting corner. I think he'll be a guy that actually I think might slip a little bit, but I think a team that drafts him is going to get a guy who day one will compete for a starting job, and I think is a guy that will be an eventual starter. To me, I could see Lassitier as a guy that would go to a really good team. Maybe, I don't know if the Chiefs need a corner, or the Chiefs don't necessarily need a corner. I know they've kind of invested capital into that, but I could see Lassitier as a guy who goes to a really good team, and he right away you see him get some snaps and then eventually becomes a starter. I think that's what Lassitier could eventually be. But Lassitier has been a rock solid piece to the Georgia defense. Maybe not a standout guy like Jalen Carter or even their other starting corner, Ringo. Maybe not necessarily a standout guy, but a guy who maybe outside of, if you're a Georgia fan, you know Lassitier, you know what he has meant to this team. But he's a guy who a lot of people outside of the Georgia fan base probably don't know. But yeah, if you're a Georgia fan, you probably do have an appreciation for what Lassitier has done, and is a guy that's just really he's not a liability at all in coverage. Some other guys, Jason Marshall from Florida, So Marshall, another guy that's got some length, size. I don't think his movement skills are really great, but he is a guy who will get physical, and just with the size and length combination will create problems for opposing wide receivers. Max Milton, another guy from Rutgers. So yeah, I mean, cornerback class pretty solid. And then DJ Jones from Auburn, DJ Jones, former transfer from Oregon. And then, so DJ Jones, I watched him in Oregon, and I turned on his Auburn tape, and from watching him on the TV broadcast, I thought I was going to see a lot better athlete. He still looks pretty good at Auburn. Fairly quick backpedal. He's very agile in turns, but he's a guy who's a little bit undersized, and not height-wise, but a little thin. So I think he's going to struggle with physicality in that sense. But yeah, James, I think how James does will be very indicative of where he's ranked and where he gets drafted. And I know I've been saying that a lot, but I think this is truly a guy who needs to have a good year. I think this is kind of a make or break year for DJ James, because you see some of the skill set. You see him flash early on at Oregon. You saw some flashes at Auburn. This year, can he put it all together, add some muscle, improve in man-to-man coverage and in zone coverage and as a tackler, which he's already pretty good at. So with all those things, with improving, with building off the first 2 years, improving, showing that he can have success in the SEC, I think with all those things factored in, if he can do that, he will stay where he's at, which he's kind of the consensus. What is it, 7-8 corner? Stay the same or maybe move up a few spots. I don't know if he'll break the top 5. But if he has a rough year, then this is a guy that just kind of could be forgotten about. I think that's what's tough about the NFL draft is you have – what's interesting about doing rankings this time of year is you have some guys who they're like up there. They're in the top 10 at their respected position, but then they have a year where they just – maybe it's injuries or they just have a down year and they're kind of just forgotten about, and they really fall down the ranking board. I'll give you an example. That was like Josh Jobe from Alabama. Josh Jobe, a couple years ago, he was drafted in 2020. Jobe was a guy who former 5-star, played at Alabama, pretty solid at Alabama. Movement skills weren't great, but Jobe was, I think he was consensus number 9, 10, maybe number 8 corner, but then just had an okay season for Alabama as last year, and just kind of you combine that with just not a great year or a less than year, and then the movement, then some of the traits were not all there, and his draft stock really plummeted. I think he went undrafted by the Eagles. I think he did make the roster last year, but this year I'm not sure what happened. So, but yeah, that's the point I'm trying to make is some guys, if they don't have that good of a year, can kind of just be forgotten about. So yeah, DJ James, another guy from Oregon to keep in mind. All right, so let's go to interior offensive line. So yeah, I got to touch on this is one of my guys, Bryce Foster from Texas A&M. Foster's been the starting center the last 2 years for A&M. Played just 4 games. Started 4 games this year and got hurt. Foster has really good play strength. This is a guy who, when he gets into you, he can really drive you back. He's really good at sustaining run blocks. He's good in pass protection. The side-to-side movement is just okay. I think that's the one thing that he lacks on. But this is a guy who, to me, is a true center. And what I mean by that is you see good run blocker, good pass blocker. He's got good size. He's physical. He's got really good play strength. Those are more so critical facts. I think center. The point I'm trying to make is center as a position. I don't think side to side movement is as critical, because you kind of are working in like a tighter spaces. It's easier to get help from your right guard or left guard. So Foster, even though the side to side movement is okay, even though he makes the most of it because he keeps his feet active, and he plays fast and is always trying to process information quick. So he does have the ability to, he can somewhat pick up stunts and blitzes fairly quickly, even though that's really not what you're going to ask Bryce Foster to do consistently, even though he can do it. But yeah, Foster, a fun watch, physical presence inside. This is a pivotal year for him because you want to see him fully healthy for Texas A&M. So, yeah, Bryce Foster, one of my favorite watches on the interior offensive line, the starting center for the Texas A&M Aggies the last 2 seasons. Should be the starter or should be the center this year. I'm not sure if they are going to try to move him to right guard or left guard. But, yeah, it'll be fun to watch Bryce Foster this year, and played a really big role 2 years ago for Texas A&M, having success offensively and upsetting Alabama at home. Zach Frazier from West Virginia. So Zach Frazier, I really like Frazier's aggressiveness. This is a guy who, in pass protection, doesn't always just want to stay in front of you. He really wants to demoralize you. There's plays where he can drive a guy in the ground. He's got active hands. You see, he's got really good football intelligence, and he's always calling out where the mic is, and you see him really communicating with his team and JT Daniels in West Virginia. So you like the aggression. I think he's got a solid anchor in pass protection. It's not great. It's a guy who overall play strength is just solid. You know, when he's run blocking, he can just stay in front of the guy. He doesn't really like drive him out of the play or absolutely maul him. But yeah, Frazier, really good player for West Virginia, and will be in the mix as one of the top interior offensive linemen. He's a guy that's shooting up the consensus right now. And so, yeah, another guy like Cedric Van Pran. Cedric Van Pran been a focal point for the Georgia offense, and it was a key piece in them winning the national title. Van Pran, big physical presence, guy that can really anchor down, hold anchor well, has good play strength, does a great job of staying in an athletic position, can pick up blitzes, stunts well. Does a good job of reach blocking. He can combo block. Does everything you want really well. And you can see why Cedric Van Pran is the consensus #1 interior offensive lineman, because he has all the ingredients you want in a really good center, like as I just mentioned. So yeah, Cedric Van Pran. It seems like the consensus #1 center by most. So we'll see if he holds that spot. I know Bryce Foster, Frazier, the 2 guys I mentioned, are going to make a push for that. But yeah, wide receiver Marvin. So Marvin Harrison, the consensus #1 wide receiver, and yeah, that Harrison just, I get vibes of Julio Jones watching him. 6'3", 6'4", a guy that just moves super well, freak of nature, a guy that Julio Jones, kind of like Marvin Harrison, didn't necessarily make a huge impact right away. Harrison Jr., you saw as a true freshman, didn't really get a whole lot of snaps. I know they had other guys there. They had Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, and Jigba. But yeah, Harrison didn't really get on the field right away and didn't really complain about it. Same with Julio Jones. He was kind of surprised. He came in as a 5-star player. I know Harrison was a 4-star, but didn't really play right away and was kind of a little rattled by it, but didn't say anything. I remember Julio Jones talking about that. And so, yeah, Marvin Harrison, but had a year this year where he really, really broke out. And that was Julio Jones. You saw 2009, you saw him. You saw 09 and 10, you saw Julio Jones, sophomore, junior year, really flash his high-end ability when he got his opportunity, kind of like Harrison. It's not that they were bad. It's just these were guys who they needed to be kind of the focal points of the offense for them to really get their for them to fully display what they were capable of. But yeah, the size, the strength, both Julio Jones and Marvin Harrison, I just see. To me, I get vibes and flashbacks of Julio Jones in his prime at Alabama and his prime in the NFL watching Marvin Harrison. Not that Julio Jones is bad now. He's getting a little older, lost his step. But yeah, Harrison Jr., just everything you want in a receiver. And it comes from a good pedigree, dad, a long-time NFL wide receiver. It's funny, I remember watching Marvin Harrison Sr. That's starting to make me feel old. I watched Marvin Harrison Sr. play for Peyton Manning and the Colts when I was a kid, and yeah, I did not realize that. You look at Harrison Jr. and you never guessed that he was his son, just because Harrison Sr., was kind of a different player, more so a guy who was a little bit shorter, kind of a little bit more of a possession receiver. I don't mean that with any disrespect, but he just doesn't have Harrison Jr. with his size and stature and strength has the ability to go up, win 50-50 balls, consistently win the back shoulder. And Harrison Sr. was good at making catches in traffic, just like Harrison Jr. too. So, yeah, you get you see a lot of the things his dad did well. You see a lot in Marvin Harrison. So, yeah, Harrison Jr. It's gonna be fun to see what he does this year. This guy that's got tremendous quickness. He's very good off the line of scrimmage. So, yeah, Harrison Jr. One of my favorite players in this 2024 NFL draft, or at least for a guy eligible, or one of the guys eligible. And then, so we'll talk some more of the top guys. Xavier Worthy, too. Xavier Worthy, really good his first couple years at Texas. This year, there's kind of rumblings about maybe he was having some issues at Texas. I'm not sure. There was like rumors he was going to transfer, so hopefully that doesn't become one of those kind of issues they continue to press, and it's one of those hot topics when come draft time. But yeah, Xavier Worthy, he's just it's an easy mover. It looks easy when he's running routes, like the burst off the line of scrimmage, the route running, the run after the catch ability. It all comes easily. It looks very natural for Xavier Worthy. So yeah, Worthy, certainly a guy that's going to be in the mix for the number 2 spot. Maybe some people could argue, I guess you could make an argument, if, say, Worthy explodes this year and you see him take his game another notch, maybe you could make the case that for him the number 1 spot, but he does not have the size and strength that Marvin Harrison does. Even though you could argue he may have better burst and overall long speed, just does the size and strength. I think that the contested catch ability is just not to the level Marvin Harrison has. But yeah, Xavier Worthy makes it look easy out there. You saw him really shine in big games, the Oklahoma game. You hope he's a little bit more consistent, even though, like I touched on, the big games he was really good. You just want to see him really be dominant and take over in more big games. I know they had other guys last year, like Jatavian Sanders, who's back. They had Bijan, Roschon Johnson. So there was a lot of mouths to feed, but you got to feel like if Worthy wants to be as good as, if Worthy wants to be worthy, pun intended, of the number 1 wide receiver, then he has to kind of just become that go-to true alpha competitor at wide receiver this year for Texas. But yeah, we'll talk. So Marvin Harrison Jr.'s teammate Emeka Egbuka. A lot of people really like Emeka Egbuka, and I do like Egbuka, but I think that Egbuka is kind of getting the benefit of being another Ohio State wide receiver who's good, but I think he's kind of being pushed up the board just because you think, oh, another wide receiver at Ohio State, former 5-star, competitive, productive. Let's just kind of pencil him up there as one of the top guys. Not to say, like I said, not to say he's not worthy of it, but I think Emeka Egbuka is a guy I think that could fall. But I think that if he falls a little bit, it's not very far. I think that he might just be being, like, the point I'm trying to make is, I think the point is he could just be being pushed up consensus rankings he's a little bit too high and just getting too much of benefit of the doubt, because even though he has been productive, I think this year, if he has another season like last year, then I think we'll have the case for that number 2 spot. But as of now, and obviously this is all hypothetical. It's very early, but if he has a season like he did last year, and maybe he improves a little bit more even as a route runner and gets a little bit stronger, a little bit quicker, then I think that, yeah, I have no problem with him number 2. I don't think he wouldn't probably, I don't know if he'd be my number 2 right now. To me, my wide receiver rankings are kind of tough because I guess I'd go Harrison 1. Romo Dunze is another guy from Washington 2. So, yeah, wide receiver is kind of tough for me to rank right now, but I would have Marvin Harrison number 1. So let's talk some more NFL draft. So a guy I wanted to touch on is Braylon Trice from Washington. So Braylon Trice, we're going to get into edge rushers here. I really like Braylon Trice's game. This guy that's competitive. He's very strong, gets off the ball quickly. I really like him rushing out of a 2-point stance. Obviously, he can rush with his hand in the ground, but Trice is so explosive out of the 2-point stance, and it's a guy that just has relentless pursuit. Like I've touched on before, will put himself in like awkward body positions just to try to make a play. It's a guy who I think will get docked in the draft process for missing tackles and maybe over pursuing on pass rush in running past the quarterback. But you got to give him credit for just putting himself into that position to make a play. This is a guy that teams really accommodate to try to stop this guy. They double team, chip him, help. They do a lot of different things to try to stop this guy. And Jared Verse gets the credit for gets the credit for all he's done, but it doesn't seem like right now he's getting docked for that. And I guess I'm not necessarily Braylon Trice is getting docked for it, but I would say if I had to guess, that's the reason why Trice is the consensus number 4 guy and he's not getting as much credit, is I think he's getting docked for that, because you do see that on tape. And a lot of these guys, so-called experts, I know myself included, I guess I'm not necessarily an expert. I'm not you know what I mean? I'm not a verified, or I'm not a scout with a lot of years experience, but to me, I think a lot of people that don't really understand scouting will dock him for missing those tackles, and I don't think he should be. So, yeah, I think Trice has got a skill set that's going to translate really well to the NFL. Whether they play him as a stand-up rush linebacker, 3 technique, hand in the ground, defensive end, I think he can do both those really well. Trice just is super fun player to watch, and is a guy that I went and watching his tape. I really thought Jared Verse was going to be the consensus number 1 edge rusher when I went into this, but when I started watching Braylon Trice, I started to really think, wow, like this guy is going to challenge for the number 1 spot. And yeah, I really am excited. He's been at Washington for a while, and this year might just be the icing on the cake where you really just see it all come together, because I think he still is a little bit raw in regards to, you feel like he's just kind of, he seems like he still doesn't have like a full feel for the game, but once that all clicks for him, which it could be this year, then you feel like it's just going to be a huge production, just big game-changing play. He already became a game changer for Washington last year. We'll see if that just carries over this year. So Braylon Trice, he's number 8 for Washington, 6'4", 267 pounds. Make sure to keep him in mind. Certainly going to be one of the top edge rushers. Consensus number 4 edge rusher, number 2 guy for me. And yeah, Jared Verse, my number 1. So Jared Verse, yeah, eye-popping production last year, 17 tackles for loss, 9 sacks. A lot of people talked about Jared Verse may have been the first edge rusher off the board had he declared for this past year's 2023 NFL draft. But yeah, I love that Verse can win with speed. He's got good speed to power. Side-to-side movement isn't like great, but it's solid. He does a good job of bursting and accelerating out of cuts. You see, forgot to mention this with Braylon Trice. Trice and Jared Verse both have this, that when they run a stunt or they get free when they're rushing, you can really see them close. You see the burst and acceleration. You can see them really close quickly on quarterbacks. They can get in the backfield in a hurry. They can be very, speaking about both these guys still, they can be both disruptive on read option and run play. So, yeah, Jared Verse is going to get a lot of talk. He's going to be one of the focal points for draft talk. When you listen to guys, because a lot of NFL draft talk shows, they immediately talk about the top guys, and rightfully so. So when you're hearing a lot of draft talk, Jared Verse is going to be one of the first guys that's always mentioned. When we get into towards the end of the season, and then the few months leading up to the NFL draft, when you get to the mock drafts, when you get bombarded with mock drafts repeatedly, Jared Verse, you're going to see his name repeatedly in the top 5, even top 3 range. So yeah, Verse is a pun intended. He is a versatile player. So Verse is a guy like Trice. You can stand him up, put his hand in the ground. I kind of like him standing up. I think he can really burst out of that 2-point stance. I think that is ideally you want to stand him up. I think he's going to be a true. Well, I say that I think you want to use. I think you want to utilize him as both a stand up and a hand in the ground rusher. I think he actually excels at both really well. So. Yeah, Jared Verse is going to be the topic of conversation in a lot of NFL draft rooms this year. How high does he go, I think, is the question. It's too early to decide that, but you have to believe that based on team needs. So the Cardinals, I'll get into that eventually, but likely the Cardinals and some of the team needs. The Cardinals could go quarterback. I think if you're fifth, to me, I guess the question with Jared Verse is if you're a team that if you're a team that's discussing a quarterback, but you could go edge rusher. I think maybe Jared Verse would be the option. Like if say Caleb Williams is off the board and you're debating between Drake May, Michael Penix, you're debating between one of the number 2 quarterback or Jared Verse. I think in that case, I don't know. That would be a tough scenario. I would go Jared Verse, but I think that could be kind of like a 50-50 call. And that's kind of been the case. That's a little bit of the case in the last few drafts, I would say. Maybe like the Lions could have. There was a debate last year's 2022 draft that could the Lions go Malik Willis at 2? Now we saw Malik Willis slip, but the point I'm trying to make is there was kind of maybe not so much among the Lions, but there was a conversation in the draft community. Do the Lions at pick 2 take an edge rusher or a quarterback? So yeah, it's a big conversation because 2 premium positions in the NFL are quarterback and edge rusher. So you ideally, if you're picking in the top 3, you want to solve. Those are the top 2 priorities, top 2 things you want to solve are quarterback and edge rusher. But yeah, Jared Verse, he's number 5 for Florida State, former transfer from Albany, so he's going to be a guy. He's going to be a guy who's going to make an impact. He's going to be a big playmaker for the Florida State defense. You really saw it this year. You saw it on fully display week 1 against LSU. What a game changer this guy can be. So the next guy, Laiatu Latu, edge from UCLA. Latu, interesting story, started his career all the way back in 2019 at Washington. Did not play in 2020 and 2021 and then transferred to UCLA this year, and you really got to see what this guy could do. Was a reserve player, did not start this year, and it kind of reminds me of Luke Van Ness, and not a starter, but every time you saw him in the game, he was disrupting things. You saw the power. You saw a disruption of offenses. You saw him making tackles for loss, tackles at the line of scrimmage. So very similar to Luke Van Ness in the sense that a guy who, when you really saw, even though he wasn't starting and playing like probably as many snaps as he should have been, he was making a big impact every time he stepped foot on the field. So yeah, very good play strength, good wrap-up tackler, dominant versus Colorado this past year, 3.5 tackles for loss, 3 sacks. And then, yeah, like I said, I mean, he's has some experience in college, been at Washington, or been in college since 2019. So gonna be a fifth-year guy this year, and yeah, he is. Some people like. There's a lot of Latu I know is growing in hype right now. There's a lot of people that really like Latu's game, and he's a guy who's going to get discussed more and more as we go along. Going to be in the mix for one of the top edge rushers. So Laiatu Latu, number 15 for UCLA Bruins, and this was a great pickup by UCLA getting this guy. I don't think they really expected he was going to be this good. I think, boy, to me it's interesting if Washington had him, that would be something, because Washington, Braylon Trice, another guy I'm going to get to from Washington, if they had those 2 guys plus Laiatu Latu, Washington, could be really extremely dominant on the defensive line. Now, you probably you might not be able to have all three of those guys out there at the same time, but just that depth and that rotation would be lethal. So Laiatu Latu, another guy. He's kind of been listed as a edge or linebacker. We'll see how the NFL views him. I think he's a true edge rusher, but is a guy that does have the versatility to play almost an off-ball linebacker if a team views him in that regard. Another guy, so number 20, Adisa Isaac from Penn State. So I turned on Isaac's tape. This is a guy who I did not really hear much about. Kind of like Latu, was a backup defensive end for Penn State last year. But when you watch his tape, this is a guy that can really explode off the ball. And this guy that plays with a sense of urgency, really rushes after the quarterback with a hurry. Got relentless pursuit. And for a guy that's not the biggest guy in the world, he has some power. There is a power element to his game. And he is a guy that with his speed, if an offensive lineman doesn't have him squared up, he can really get by him. And Isaac, Chop Robinson, kind of the guy that's getting a lot of the talk. I think this is a guy who he may steal the thunder from Chop Robinson and become not only the best defensive end edge rusher for Penn State, maybe their best defensive player. And if I heard myself say that a few days ago when I saw Kalen King, like Kalen King is, to me, I thought for sure would be their top defensive player for this year. But now that I've really watched Isaac, don't be surprised if this guy becomes Penn State's best defender. It's a guy that, like I touched on, he did not play a lot of snaps last year. So if he gets a full starting role, which he likely will be, he's going to play opposite of Chop Robinson. Those two are going to be really dynamic. I think Isaac will get a lot of attention, and a lot of people would be discussing him as the top player on the Penn State defense, and he's a guy that will likely rise up the consensus board in most people's mind. Not only the consensus board, but rise up his draft ranking in most people's mind. So Zion Tupelo Fatui, another edge rusher from Washington. And what stands out about Fatui for Washington is his hand usage is really good. It's a guy that does a really good job. He uses his two-hand strike really well. He's got an effective rip move. His power is just okay. It's not good. It's not great. But I think this is a guy who the NFL is going to like his hand use. I think this is a guy it's pro ready and he's in regards to that he's very polished. So I think the NFL will view him in a high regard, just that he's pro ready. I think this is a guy that'll probably go third or fourth round guy, but I think this is an NFL team that when you draft him, you kind of know what you're getting. This is a guy that's ready to go. Might not have as much upside just because he's kind of missing the power element to his game and missing some of the quickness, the lateral movement and power element to his game. But as far as hand usage, experience, I think this is a guy that's ready to go, and I think a guy that'll develop into a nice starter in the National Football League. So yeah, I just wanted to touch on some of those guys in the edge rusher. So let's get back to the quarterback and Quinn Ewers. I think Quinn Ewers is just such a fascinating guy in this draft because Quinn Ewers, if you remember, if we go back to high school, perfect rating coming out of high school. First perfect rating for a high school recruit since Vince Young. Ironically, they both played at Texas. And Quinn Ewers, I did not know much about him. I remember him coming onto the field against Ohio State, and I'm like, who is this guy? And then, I look him up, and he had reclassified, and then this year transferred to Texas. And so you're watching him at Texas this year, wins the job, and over Hudson Card, a guy that played, and you're watching Quinn Ewers, and you're like, man, this guy really, his arm, his skill set really translated well to college, and this guy has a live arm, throw from different arm angles, and you're watching that first half, week 2 against Alabama, and you're like, wow, this guy is legit. It's like if Texas wins this, he stays in this game, and Texas wins this game, then you're like, the hype after that game is legit. Now, the hype was still pretty legit, but you saw Texas kind of lose some games. You saw Quinn Ewers have the game he had against Oklahoma State where he had some turnovers, was a little bit careless with the ball. And, the number's not really eye-popping for Quinn Ewers. So I think Ewers this year you hope he cleans up some things. You hope that he plays with a little more sense of urgency. It sounds like he's put in a lot of work on his body. Sounds like he's hungry, really motivated. This Texas offense should be prolific once again. So this year, pivotal year for Quinn Ewers, and he's risen to number 3 consensus ranking. And that's what, after that Alabama game, that injury, I was thinking like, man, is Quinn Ewers kind of going to work himself into being a lock for the second quarterback off the board, or the second quarterback drafted behind Caleb Williams? And to me, a big year this year, and that very well could happen. Now, as Ewers struggled this year, I think as he struggled, it would be crazy to say that, yeah, Quinn Ewers is for sure going to be the second quarterback off the board. I think people can, you certainly can make a case for it as of right now, even though there's not a lot of people arguing that just because of the skill set he has. But if people were to say that he was going to be the second quarterback off the board when Texas had lost some games, I think, you'd get a lot of heated disagreements. So, yeah, but Quinn Ewers, fascinating guy, and we'll see how he plays along with this Texas offense. I think this is a guy that's as how he plays will be indicative of how the Texas offense performs overall, even though they do have, I think even if Ewers does not, even if he plays okay, I think the Texas offense still perform well. But if Texas is going to do something this year, you got to believe that it's due to Quinn Ewers really balling out. So shift back to running back. There's one running back I forgot to talk about, Montrell Johnson from Florida. Montrell Johnson is a physical runner, and this is a guy that he does a good job of making quick, short cuts. You see a lot of bursts and acceleration. You saw he was in the Georgia game. He was tough to bring down, and a guy who does have the capability he gets up to top speed quickly. Shows the ability to break some long runs, so you like that. I really like his vision. I think that, I'm watching Montrell Johnson. I've already watched a lot of really good running backs. I'm thinking, wow, this is a really talented running back class. So, yeah, Montrell Johnson just adding to that, a really good running back for the Florida Gators. So, Montrell Johnson, just going to add him to the list of some of the other top running backs I've talked about, like Trey Benson, Braylon Allen, both the guys from Michigan, Donovan Edwards, Blake Corum, Travion Henderson. So Montrell Johnson from Florida is a guy who he's pretty low in the consensus rankings, but don't be surprised if he shoots way up. So definitely keep Montrell Johnson's name in mind. Bo Nix from Oregon. So Bo Nix, the more I watch of Bo Nix, the more I really like. And he was a guy that at Auburn, I really didn't get an appreciation for Bo Nix's arm at Auburn. But now that I've watched it, if you watch, and I think watching his tape, watching all 22 tape, you really get a appreciation for Bo Nix. He looks a lot, this past year he looked a lot more comfortable in the pocket. He stands tall in the pocket. It looks like an NFL quarterback in college just by the way he processes quickly, and I like the way he can look one way and then quickly go the other way and make the throw. He looks like an NFL quarterback going through his reads. So Bo Nix, I think he's done a really good job of developing as a quarterback. I think the move from Auburn to Oregon actually was a really good one. I think a lot of people questioned that transfer, that move at the time. I was like, and I pictured, so I didn't have an appreciation for Bo Nix's arm at Oregon. To me, when I thought of him transferring to Oregon, I kind of pictured him as like a Darren Thomas, Marcus Mariota type of role at Oregon, where you got a guy who he's going to make a lot of plays running the ball, but maybe not really put a lot of pressure on opposing defenses passing the ball. And his passing has really taken off at Oregon, and I did not think he would take another step as a passer at Oregon, and he very well has done so. So another year in Dan Lanning's offense. Dan Lanning, really good coach for Oregon. So Bo Nix is going to have a chance to do some really nice things in 2023, and is a guy that I think could be the second quarterback off the board. And to me, I think that even if Bo Nix isn't the first or second quarterback off the board, I think he's going to be a team where people are really excited for. To me, it's kind of similar to, was Anthony Richardson the third quarterback off the board this year? I think so, because it kind of reminds me of Anthony Richardson. Now, Richardson, not the consensus 1 or 2 guy, but Richardson was like the third or fourth guy. Him and Will Levis kind of back and forth. But Anthony Richardson was super polarizing. I think Bo Nix will be a polarizing guy. I think that just the athleticism, the throws Bo Nix makes on the run are just really, really good. So to me, even if Bo Nix has a year where he struggles with interceptions, maybe he's trying to do too much, kind of like Anthony Richardson did, I think Bo Nix, is going to be talked about in high regard just for the way that he can make throws on the run, can throw with touch, throws a nice tight spiral, short mid-range accuracy. Deep ball accuracy isn't great, but I'd say it's pretty good. He definitely can do it. I think that's certainly a part of his game where he can work on. But yeah, Bo Nix is going to be a fun guy to watch, and I'm excited to listen to how experts are going to view him. I'm interested to see how the NFL will view Bo Nix, and because at this time of year, we're still a long way from the draft, but how the NFL views Bo Nix will be interesting to me. So we'll shift to the linebackers here. Tommy Eichenberg from Ohio State. So Tommy Eichenberg, kind of like Bo Nix. The more I watch, the more I really like Eichenberg's game. This guy that his lateral movement is outstanding. This guy that reads plays very well. He reads plays so quickly that it almost looks like I think he plays fast, but I think that he reads plays so quickly that it makes it look like he's playing even faster, if that makes sense. And he's a guy who he works through traffic so well, has no regard for his body. You saw he played with 2 broken thumbs this year, so tough as nails, plays fast, takes on blocks. Tommy Eichenberg, I'm gonna say it right now. As much as I like Barrett Carter was my number one. I have Tommy Eichenberg as my number 1 linebacker. I've just fallen in love with Eichenberg's game. I think that he is exactly, if I'm an NFL team, even if you don't think this guy, is Tommy Eichenberg ever gonna be, I don't even mean this with any disrespect, because I just went on and on about Eichenberg. Is he ever gonna be a elite? Will he ever be a Ray Lewis, Luke Kuechly, just a generational linebacker? Probably not. But is Eichenberg going to be a really good linebacker? Tough as heck, a guy that the fan base loves, probably going to make a couple Pro Bowls? Absolutely. I think that is what Tommy Eichenberg can bring to the table. I think this is a guy that's going to fit right into the NFL with his toughness, with his ability to read plays. To me, forget everything else. If you just take those 2 things about Tommy Eichenberg, I think those are 2 traits that's going to keep him in the NFL for a long time. His competitive toughness, or his toughness and his ability to read plays quickly. Those 2 things as a linebacker, those 2 things will get you very far as a linebacker in any level of football, and will bring you a lot of success. So the next guy I want to talk about, Jeremiah Trotter from Clemson. Trotter, he's like Eichenberg, he reads plays very quickly. Physical tackler. You see when he hits people, he can really force some fumbles. Does have good hands to come down with interceptions. Makes plays. Can make plays on the ball. See, he moves pretty well. Can drop into coverage nicely. Not a guy that I would want to consistently ask to play man coverage, but is a guy that does excel in zone coverage. So yeah, Trotter from Clemson, a really nice player, and he's the consensus number 1 linebacker. I would not have him as number 1. He'd probably be my 3 or 4. But yeah, Trotter, dad played in the NFL. Is a guy that to me, that makes a lot of sense because this is a guy that just has a really natural feel for the linebacking position. I'm sure his dad has taught him a lot about reading plays and a lot of the nuances of the linebacker position. The guy he looks like he was destined to be a linebacker. Just looks like a guy that you're just going to plug in the box. He's going to make tackles. He's going to show out for you every Sunday. Just be that rock, that anchor at a Mike linebacker. Probably, yeah, true middle Mike linebacker in a 3-4 or a 4-3. So to me, that's what I see in Jeremiah Trotter. So a fan of his game. So yeah, we got a few minutes here. Let's do some rapid fire. I wanted to do a quick mock draft if we had time. So let's do it. So number one, I got the Arizona Cardinals taking Caleb Williams, quarterback, USC. If Arizona struggles, it's likely because Kyler Murray played bad, so they'll take Caleb Williams there. Number 2, I got him going Marvin Harrison Jr. Now, there's other ways they could have went. I could have had the Cardinals take an edge rusher. I could have had him go tight end Brock Bowers, but I'm not going to overthink it here. Marvin Harrison Jr., freak of nature. I've compared him to Julio Jones. Don't overthink it. If you draft Caleb Williams, pair him with a stud receiver in Marvin Harrison. Number 3, I got the Tampa Bay Buccaneers taking Jared Verse, the edge rusher from Florida State. To me, if you're Tampa Bay, if you have the 3rd pick, then you know a lot of things went wrong. So maybe edge rusher's not the number 1 list of needs, but I'll say this about Tampa: if the season did go that way, then why not just go back to get one of the foundational pieces you need to succeed in the NFL, an edge rusher. So I think Jared Verse makes a lot of sense. Number 4, Indianapolis. I have them taking Brock Bowers. Now, the Colts have done a nice job of getting depth at tight end. They took Jelani Woods. They got Jelani Woods, tight end that played at Virginia, who's he's a guy who's okay. Mo Alley Cox has been okay, but why not get a superstar for Anthony Richardson? And that's what Brock Bowers is. Not only can he catch, he can also block too. Number 5, this was my favorite pick. Washington taking Bo Nix, quarterback from Oregon. Washington's a team I've just been desperate to see them get a quarterback. And I'm not a Washington fan, but Washington with a good quarterback is something I just want to see. And I think as a Washington fan, that's something you'd be dying to see as well. Number 6, Green Bay Packers taking Michael Penix, quarterback from Washington. So if Green Bay really struggles this year, it's likely because Jordan Love didn't play well. So then I got the Packers going quarterback here. Number 7, Las Vegas Raiders taking Kool-Aid McKinstry. So a lot of different directions the Raiders could go here. They could probably use a quarterback. They could think about, defensive line. But Kool-Aid McKinstry, best corner in this draft. Raiders get him at 7. Number 8, Tennessee Titans, Mason Smith, defensive tackle, LSU. Mason Smith, best defensive tackle I've evaluated for next year, so they take him there. Number 9, the Rams taking Olu Fashanu, offensive tackle from Penn State. So the Rams have a lot of needs, but why not sure up one and get a stud tackle who's super athletic, who moves very well in Olu Fashanu? So obviously the Rams are that high. It's likely because Stafford struggled, so quarterback could be on the Rams' mind. Rams have so many needs, but getting a offensive tackle is a way to clear up a lot of holes offensively. Number 10, Chicago Bears taking Braylon Trice. Bears just need help defensively, and they need star power defensively. So getting a guy like Braylon Trice would be critical for the Chicago Bears. But yeah, that rounds out the top 10. I'm going to wrap with that, guys. Thanks for tuning in to the Brant Parshall Show. Make sure to stay tuned for more episodes and clips from the show.